Welcome along. This is In Conservation with, I'm David Lindo. And actually, can I make sure, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. I'll start again. Hello. And this is In Conservation with, I'm actually not at my normal place. I'm not with a bunch of black wheaties either. I'm in a hotel reception in a hotel, obviously, but in southern Serbia, right next to the Romanian border. And I was just explaining before pressing the record button, I'm scared that 20 or so drunken Serbs might rush in, shouting and ordering more drinks and stuff. So if that happens, I'm really, apologizing in advance. This is In Conservation with, I'm David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder, and it's sponsored tonight. It's sponsored by CJ Wildlife, as well as Leica Sport Optics. So thank you guys for sponsoring us. And let's go straight into this. I'd like to welcome my guests and my good friend and my Dutch brother, Marc Guyt. How are you, Marc, and where are you?
Hi, David. Thank you for having me. My actual name is Marc Guyt, which is sort of, nobody can speak it outside the Netherlands. So my good friend Rafa always tells it is Marc Guyt. So that's the only way to pronounce it. And it's a little bit like Scheveningen, the Dutch word, which is, it's the most difficult word for foreigners to pronounce. Currently, I'm in the Netherlands, in Katwijk, which is a small town next to the sea, just like 15 kilometers north of The Hague.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank you firstly for being here tonight, this afternoon, to talk to us about this really fascinating handbook. And also I'd like to thank you behind the scenes because you were very instrumental in getting quite a few guests on recently on In Conservation, because this man is one of the most connected men on the planet in terms of the birding and sort of natural history world. Okay, Marc is very connected. So thank you very much for putting me in touch with some really interesting people. Anyway, thinking about that, I mean, you are yourself a very interesting person, quite an interesting person. I can't remember when I actually first met you. You're one of those guys, one of those people who I've just kind of known all the time. I certainly remember you a few years ago in Israel for, in the Champions of the Flyway. So I remember admiring the name of your team, the Dutch Knights, which I thought was such a brilliant name of the team. But can you enlighten me as to when we actually first conversed?
Yeah, I think it was the second Champions of the Flyway. And we were, of course, with my good friend Martijn, with Guyt Ottens. And we named ourselves the Dutch Knights because the first year we won the the Knights of the Flyway Award. So we thought, okay, we come back, but then we need a name, that we can stick to. And that was the Dutch Knights. And I think you were with the Estremadura team, with Vanessa, and I think with a film crew. And we were in this fancy Israeli hotel where we meet after the event. So I think that it was the first time that we met.
Yeah, but we really connected actually last year because you came to Extremadura for the bird fair, Theo, and we crossed paths a couple of times. And you then, I think a bit later than that, a few weeks later, whatever, you stayed with me for a week and we did some really great birding around the region, which I won't forget. It was quite a good experience, seeing some good stuff, including finding my first ever spotted crake on my own.
Yeah,
with you actually.
Yeah, in a super nice area.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, listen, I think we should talk about your handbook because you gave me, thank you very much. You gave me a copy. In fact, the handbook split into two, so there's two handbooks to cover all the families in the Western Palearctic. And I was immediately struck by some of the imagery in it because it is a photographic guide. But there's certain things in there which I learned, even though I can't speak Dutch or understand Dutch. But there's a few things I learned straight away looking at that. I mean, for example, when I looked at the plate with the coots, the common coot, crested coot, and the American coot, and I realized I was struggling with the double crested coot because I always thought that you had to look for a slightly slenderer neck and that the bill is slightly blue in hue. And when I've seen that in the field, it's been so difficult to find that. I mean, there was one in Extremadura that my good friend Martin Kelsey found, and it took me forever and a day to find it. And then looking at your book, I realized that actually, if you look at the shape of the feathering around the beak, in the common coot, it's really a sharp point. And in the crested coot, it's a rounded thing, rounded sort of shape. And it was just so obvious. And now to me, I don't think I'll have a problem ever again. So thank you very much for showing me that. But please, I mean, for the people who haven't sort of come across you, in fact, let's talk about you for a second. I mean, you yourself, you run an agency, a photographic agency called Agami, which is well regarded around the world. But can you just quickly, briefly tell us, how did you get into this whole world? Where did you come from in terms of where did you get on board the train? And can you just quickly give us a potted history up until now?
Oh, I don't know where to start, but basically I've been a bird watcher all my life. So even when I was like a few years old, I was always wondering about always wanted to look behind the horizon, what was there. So there was this urge of finding, and it was always nature. And because we didn't have lions and tigers and leopards in the Netherlands or in Europe, birds caught my attention already from an early age, and soon I already borrowed my dad's binocular and then his camera. And actually, when I was 11 or 12 years, the camera really grabbed my attention. And there was a huge birding community in where I lived in Katwijk, and it was very social. So if you were just a young birder, you were just one of the guys. Even some people were 40 or 50. You were tagged along. You were welcome on the, where they watched migration. And that started my journey. And the camera was always there. And when I started taking pictures on travels, and then at one point I thought, okay, I want to do something with all these images. And then there was like photo agencies, but it was like too far away from me. So at one point I thought, why don't I do it myself? And I found, friend Roy, and he had a lot of slides, and said, can I borrow your slides? And he said, yeah, but I want to join. And I have a friend, Will, he also wants to be, he's also a very nice guy. And I knew him. So then we started this company, Agami. And what we really wanted, was to provide images to nature and bird conservation, and participate in projects to, instead of selling an image to a newspaper, we rather provide images to companies that are closer to our heart, and that's basically how we always operated. And in the meantime, I still started traveling and taking pictures. And when the digital camera came, it became a problem because you take too many pictures. But I've always been into the birding and photography, the mix, and never been full 100% birder. I don't even have a telescope because I like my birds close, and I always carry my camera. So it was on the edge between the two disciplines.
It's interesting in the Netherlands. I always get the impression that you're all super keen in the Netherlands, and you all seem to be at a really good level of sort of knowledge. Most of the Dutch birders I've met, and I think it kind of, if you sort of put it on as a percentage, it seems like you guys are probably more kind of keen and more knowledgeable in some ways than some other nations that I've come across, including the UK. I don't ask you to agree with that, but that's a feeling I have sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's I think the route in was different. I think that it was. I think the history of bird watchers in the UK was much broader and larger. And in the Netherlands, there was like this big group. It's called the NOU, which was like more, conservative bird watchers. And then Dutch birding already came, I think, in the 80s. And they really wanted to change the scenery, and it was a big group, and they were focusing on identification and finding and sharing the news. And I think that took really off. And I think that I think there's a difference in the Netherlands of I think the entry level of bird watchers. especially now, kids of 17, 18, they have more knowledge than, and they've seen more than, I saw when I was 40. It's increasing. So there is this drive of, of sharing and getting information.
Yeah, and I've also, one thing about the Dutch birding scenario, the Dutch birding world is, and people make fun of it, is the fact that you split or seem to split everything. If it looks slightly different, it's a different species. Is that a fair comment?
No, I think from my point of view, it's the other way around. Why should you lump everything? There is, birds is about diversity, and I think if you're too conservative, valid species get extinct, or subspecies get extinct because, it's just a subspecies. So from my point of view, a very rigid taxonomy could be counterproductive for conservation at some points. And I think if you're progressive, because the Dutch were progressive, a lot of things have been confirmed afterwards. And you've been traveling around as well. Sometimes you see things that are, the guidebook says it's the same, and you look at it, you hear it, you see it behaves differently. It can't be the same species. There is difference. So I just like all, the difference already. And if it's a species or not, it doesn't matter too much. But because we focus more on subspecies and potential splits, the awareness of identification also increases, and people want to see it and then learn more. So being more progressive also leads to more knowledge, from my point of view.
Yeah, I agree with that. But listen, let's look at the book that you've put together. I mean, it's a mammoth task. Anyone putting together a field guide need to watch this. I mean, this will show you just how much work's been put into it.
Yeah. So you want me to start the presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
And for those who aren't familiar, watch this on speaker view so you can see the whole thing on your screen and not a bunch of little boxes with a tiny box with Marc in it.
Yes. Okay.
Do
you see it, David?
All good. Yeah.
Okay, this is now welcome everybody to In Conservation With. Thank you, David, for having me and be able to talk a little bit about our little side project in the last years. I named it The Quest to Create the Ultimate Photo ID Guide, which was basically what we had in mind when we started it. And if we succeeded or failed, that's up to other people. But our idea was, our vision was to create something visual, which was, also super helping birders to get all the identification knowledge of professionals. So with that, I want to start. Maybe as an intro, the problem that I wanted to solve when I started this adventure together with Niels was, there are many times in the field, especially when you're younger, you have little knowledge that you're in the field, and then you're more experienced birders, and they say, look, and they say, okay, this is this species, or it's first winter Caspian gull, or something specific. But nobody explains why, because they have the knowledge, but it's very difficult to explain people, okay, why it is what they see. It's based on experience. They know what to look for. But many times, especially also when I was older, when on Twitches, you have these more experienced birders, and they talk about tertials or primary projections or tail projections, the color of the supercilium. And and I was always watching other people, with less experience, and instead of asking questions, what are you talking about? That level and it was sort of counterproductive. That people were just getting away of, instead of emerging in the conversation. So I thought, okay, now how can we make something, that would be super, something that really literally explains what it is, what you can see, and that you don't need the experienced birders just identify any species. And basically that's because my friend Niels he is super keen in identification, and his hobby was for many years was to write down all the identification markers of all the species and subspecies and all plumages of the Western Palearctic birds. And he did it because he wanted to know himself what, which each plumage looked like. But he said, okay, because he thought, I can't remember everything, he's just writing it down. And he had this Milton map with all these text, all of these bullet points with identification features. And some friends said, okay, can you share this information? And then it was shared among friends. And then Dutch Birding got hold of it. And they published it in a book called the Kenmerkengids, the Dutch Birding Kenmerkengids, which is basically the ID guide. And it was unique in its kind that it was an identification guide without any plates, any images, just plain text, which I will show later. And that was translated in English, and then 2 versions of the book came out, which were a huge success. Was well pronounced because it was so down to earth and very accessible information. If you saw something, you thought, okay, this might be a first winter Cashmere Gull, you went into the book, and then all these identification features of all the plumages were just written down. On the left, you see the Dutch version, and on the English, the right version. And it was very small. You could put it in your pocket or in your car, and you always had all the identification of all the subspecies and species of the Western Palearctic at your reach. In the meantime, I was having this stock agency, Agami, with my 2 friends, Will on the left and Roy in the middle. And we were also collecting all the plumages of the European bird species. And it was mainly because we had some very, very good photographers like Marcus Farasfiro and Daniel Chato, who had, so many plumages and photographs in super high quality of all these European birds. That I thought, okay, I want to do more with it, just, because we had so much and there was so little, just in the Netherlands, usually robins and blackbirds and those kind of species are the highest in demand. But first winter Maltese warbler, nobody wants to use. But we had all this great content. So I was just thinking, okay, how can I just solve my problem with my images? So at one point at the Dutch Birding Day, maybe around 10 years ago, I saw Niels on the Dutch Birding Day, and I did my pitch, which was super simple. I said, okay, you have this field guide, or the Kenmerkengids, or the advanced ID guide. We have all the images. Let's make the best bird guide possible with images and your identification features. And I added the simple line, how hard can it be? Because we thought, it might not be too difficult. We already have everything, so maybe just combining everything together, and then we have this great book. And what I basically had in mind was a field guide with all the identifiable plumages, and then the ID text next to each image, so then you can pinpoint where it is. So basically on this rosier tern, adult rosier tern, you have all these identification features, and if you put it right next to the image and then you really point it where it is, then people, not only read it, but also can see it on the bird. And we also want to add details, so you can just enlarge some identification features, and then, it should pinpoint exactly where we want it, but besides the image also should show the identification feature. And what what I have experienced in the past, that you see a picture, maybe in Dutch Birding, and there is a description, and it says, okay, it has black supercilium, and then you look at the image and you think, yeah, but it's not black, or where is it? Because sometimes identification feature are mostly present and not always. So there is like a gradation of visibility, and it depends on where. But that was our vision. We wanted to have everything what you could identify in the field in Europe, but also showing pictures with the image. And I also wanted a lot of these comparison plates, because sometimes you have 2 similar looking species, maybe a first winter booted warbler and some Philoscopus warblers, but they are not related, so they're not close in the field guide. So we thought, if you put similar looking birds next to each other with identification features, It's like a quick reference guide of, anything what is out there in the field. And he also wanted it to be visual stunning. It should be like a tribute to the birds that we all love. And especially because, these photographers all have this action-packed photography, and, the book should be like something also to be visual stunning to browse in, so that you not only learn identification features, but it's also a pleasure to look into. So that's what basically what Niels and I had in mind. Niels was in charge of all the writing. I was looking for the remaining pictures that we said that we knew we needed, but we didn't know how many. And it took about a year, I think, to find the right publisher, and we found that in Jack Volkers from the KNNV. And he was also already thinking for some time about a similar book, so he was just like a perfect match for us in the team. And then we started already with the process, and we had a normal design company who was doing the plates, but it didn't work out. And at one point they give back the assignment because it took too much time, and and they were not doing what we wanted, so there was a mismatch. And then we found, or Niels found, Sam Gobin, which is a designer, and he was, Niels's oldest birding friend, who was reconnected, and he was like the perfect match in the team to get, the division that we all wanted out on the plates. So when we had this team, we said, this was the perfect setting for us to really start our project. And there was like a fifth team member as well. We already envisioned in the beginning is that, we needed all the Agami photographers as part of the team. Because, they were the ones who were providing the images, and there were still things missing. So, if they were on board, then we could really make the best book possible with images. And three of the main photographers from the whole project are Marcus Farasfuo, Daniela Chata from Italy, and Ralph Martin. And they are basically the backbone of the images of the book. And with the three of them, there is more than 40% of the images in the book just from three of them. And Marcus and Daniela were already from the beginning, and Rolf I found somewhere halfway in the project when we needed more from Asia. And he had, all these stunning images from Southwest Asia and South Asia, from the Middle East. And, with their help, a large chunk of what was needed already covered. But we also had some really ambassadors of the project. We were, which was super helpful. One of them is Fred Visser. Fred is super keen on identification and looking in small details and looking especially from ducks and waders. Vincent from Belgium is very keen in the Western Palearctic. He chases all these rarities and all these plumages that you need. And was also chasing, together with Fred, the missing plumages. So we sent out lists where we comment later, and they went out and tried to find a bird, take pictures, and then we could process in the book. And Daniel Lopez Velasco from Spain, super helpful. He chased not only missing plumages in the field, but he also connected us to many photographers, especially from the Spain and Southern Europe, to find the missing gaps. And the last one is Edwin Winkle, the same as Fred. He was looking at his plumages that nobody, take pictures of and chasing it for us. And there were some other photographers who were also very keen on the project, and they provided many images, without question asked. Ian Davis has a lot of images in autumn plumages from America. Brian had almost all American birds in summer and spring plumage in the highest quality. Helge was on board for many birds in flight and also missing specific autumn plumages. And Chris is a super nice Dutch photographer who is super keen, and he just likes some major projects, which we come on later, but also including Iceland girls. He went to Newfoundland just to see how the Iceland girls and the Cumberland girls looked there. And when we went there, we just sent them a list. Okay, can you also take pictures of, this missing species? And they came back with all these plumages, and you have less gaps and less problems to worry about. And finally, two of my main my photography brothers who were on many adventures, and helped me on the lows and also shared the highs. Rafael from Spain and Martijn from the Netherlands. We chased many missing gaps ourselves and trips to find missing plumages, and I couldn't have done it without them. So big thanks. And then it was the plan. We had this this vision in mind, what we wanted. So the plan was, Niels, you have all the ID text available. Like we said, Agami, we have almost all photos needed. We want to make a field guide, and we think because we have everything, it's 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years work. In reality, all text was written from scratch, and in the end, it's like 330,000 plus words Niels has written in the last years. We had half the missing species or plumages were missing. So we thought we have everything, but basically half was missing, and a lot of things, they were not photographed before, as far as we know, and it was especially photographed, by the photographers for this project. Instead of a field guide, it became 2 volumes. It's more than 1,000 pages, and more than 5,500 images have been used, and they have all been cut out and designed in the plates. And it took a little bit more than 2 years. So I just had a discussion with Niels yesterday, and it was more than 6 years that 6 years ago, before it was published, that he made the first draft of a species document to describe the plumage and selected the pictures. So it was almost 6.5 years of work, of writing and finding images and collated it in the book. So what did we do in the 6 years? The workflow was simple. Niels just started at the beginning of the normal species checklist. He made a document in Word. He was looking for images of the plumages that he needed. And he started writing the text, the identification text, but also the identification feature next to the images. And then he already made it in the photograph, okay, where it should pinpoint. These kind of documents were sent to some, and some he transformed them in a design. But next to this document, there was also a list of plumages Niels needed. So he said, okay, I have the common snipe, but I need a first winter common snipe in flight showing the underwing. He sent me a document, and I processed that in a gap list. But this is how Sam then transformed it on the plates. So basically, this is what Niels sent to some, and some he cut out the images and then was rearranging it so that it could fit in one page. And there's mostly like introduction text and identification features, and then pinpointing them to the exact spot on the bird, and it should be also visible on the image. And I got the remaining list of, say, okay, what we needed. And on the right is a small portion of the gap list, how we called it. In the end, it was 2,350 lines long of missing plumages. You see a small part in the middle. Every species has been written down. There is, okay, where it does it occur. Which gender, which age, and is it date specific? But because we wanted to have the plumage in the date that you see it in Europe, or that the date that it shows a feature. Some first winter birds, they show the feature in the beginning of the first winter plumage, but because of mold or wear, or already maybe of changing the feathers, it changes. So we also sometimes we just needed like October or November, which made it super specific and also sometimes hard to find. And then you have to wait sometimes a whole year to have the chance to take a picture of. And this was the internal document. And in the end, then I made a visual document for the photographers, which I sent out. And it was basically stalking them for images okay, this is what we need. And I was chasing them, you know, looking on their websites, asking images just to get everything as soon as possible, you know, in store so we can process it in the species file. And we had like 3 prios, must have, should have, and nice to have, but basically almost everything that we needed has been found and be included in the book. That, you know, we thought if we have to do it, we have to do it right. And some people were super keen on finding us, you know, the missing plumages, and one of them is Fred. Fred has a keen eye for identification features like gold-billed terns. He's already chasing gold-billed terns for the last years, and this is a third calendar year. So most terns have a first winter, second year bird, and then third year is super adult. But gold-billed terns you can still identify in the third year of the plumage, and it's basically of the generation differences in feathers. So it has old and newer feathers, which makes it like a very pied plumage of an adult gold-billed tern. But because nobody takes pictures of gold-billed terns when they look like this, you know, it's very super hard to find. So you have to know what you're looking for and then chase them. Some other very difficult plumage that we needed was a rough, but then a buff-breasted sandpiper lookalike. So in the most field guides that say, okay, you know, it can look like a buff-breasted sandpiper, but in the field it's a super rare plumage and nobody takes pictures of. So Fred was looking out in August, you know, on all these indurated tulip fields to look at the roughs, finding a bird that looked like it, take picture, process it, and then we can process it. And some things are, you know, like second year calendar female common shelduck. It's like a first winter bird in summer. So, you know, it's easy to identify at some point if you know where to look for, but because it's not a pristine adult male, you know, nobody takes a picture of, so it's very hard actually to get the image. And Fred was super keen also in his ducks, and all these 4 tufted ducks are from his hand. There are 1 million tufted duck adult male pictures, but first winter males and females identify correctly are more and more rare, and they also look different in the same time of year because you have advanced mold and retarded mold. So on the right top is a first winter male in January, and on the left bottom is also first winter male in January. So you might think it's a little bit worn adult, but basically it's already a first winter molting more into an adult type. But, you know, somebody like Fred had to go chase, you know, these images, take pictures because, you know, they were not available at that stage. Vincent Legrand was another star. One of the things that we really missed was eclipse plumages of some of the northern ducks. And they were not around because nobody visited these places in summer, you know, when they're in eclipse plumage, probably because they're not present in the breeding colonies, but they go up north into the, at sea, so nobody sees them. And in the end, we had to search collections in the Netherlands where they have these ducks present. We call them, can we take pictures? And Vincent went in to, find an eclipse plumage of Stellus eider. And from my knowledge, this is one of the first images of an eclipse male ever. But all the other ducks like Harlequin duck and spectacled eider, Stellus eider, king eider, Iceland, what is it? Not the other golden eye.
Barrows
golden eye. Everybody wants this super nice picture of an adult male, and if it looks scrubby, forget about it. Dani Lopez was super keen also in finding some plumages in northwestern Spain. And one of the things that I didn't even know that existed was the Whistly type of meadow pipit. And it's sort of like a red-throated pipit pitfall. And it breeds in Britain, Wales and northern Britain apparently. And it winters in Spain. and it has like this rufous throat and plumages, and we struggled to find pictures, and then Dani found an image in March. It's, for me, it was the first ever picture that I saw of a Whistler type meadow pipit. So you need people like Dani and Fred and Vince, and really to chase these super rare plumages. But in the end, we got it, and we got it because we were pushing the boundaries of what was available. Chris was, like I said, he's keen in projects, and one of his main addictions is redpolls. And he goes to Iceland, but he also went to Greenland twice just to find out how these redpolls look there. So he went in winter to Iceland for redpolls, and then he went to summer just to find out if they look different. And his conclusion was, they're not much different. But then he has all these plumages of redpolls, and he really wanted to photograph the Arctic redpoll of Greenland, and that got us the stunning cover of a book. This is one of the best birds that you can see in the Western Palearctic, an adult male horn-months redpoll. But because you have photographers going to these remote places for odd plumages, then it's possible to get them in the poses that you want. And the most fun for me example of pushing the boundaries was Rafa. I asked him when he was doing a short road trip to Spain, and I said, okay, Rafa, if you're going to Spain, can you take 2 plumages from me, or 2 poses? And the reply I got was impossible. But a day later, I got my Dupont's lark in flight, which he took pictures of. And so, if you don't ask, you don't get anything. And because I asked, can you do it? He thought I'd just try. And in the end, we got our flying Dupont's lark, which I hadn't seen before, pictures of. So super happy with it. And what we also found during, the looking for the plumage is that there were some type of plumages super difficult to get. And one of the most difficult was the first winter mute swan. After 4 years, we still didn't have the needed plumage of a mute swan. And then at that point, some was a little bit, he thought, okay, then I just go outside. So he just went out into Leiden where he lived, went into the park during January and photographed this mute swan. Because now you have this pied plumage where you have juvenile gray feathers and new white feathers. But because it looks scruffy, these pictures are hard to come by, and that really led us to what we thought is that the challenges were anything what was not an adult male plumage and very common. So a mallard adult male, there's so many plumages, but here there is an adult male mallard on the top, which is an eclipse plumage in September, and then the bottom is a first year male from August. Nobody has these pictures, because what I think is that if people take pictures, they focus on the males, and if you're lucky, they do the males or the other plumages. But when they're at home and they have so many plumages images to process, they first start with the adult males, and then if you're lucky, they do something else. So it's they are maybe available in the dungeons of backlogs of photographers, but they're very difficult to see the light of day. So we really, mostly the common birds in these kind of plumages what took us the most time to find. And another difficult plumage in Europe is first summer birds, but that summer in southern parts of Europe, or maybe Africa, or in Asia, or in South America. Because some species, they just spend the first year in the south and then come back when they're really in summer plumage. And occasionally you get, one or few birds that come back, like this second year blackthorn. It's basically already a molting adult, but in July. So it looks like, not the pristine one that you get. But they're super difficult to find in Europe. And if they're here, not many people take pictures of them because, they're not, most people prefer super nice adult black-tern and not these mottled kind of types. But second year purple herons, squawko herons, we struggled, to find the correct image, because we also wanted to have them photographed in Europe, because Niels could see based on the warn if it was taken in Europe, yes or no, because it was summering in Africa, it looks different than it was summering in Europe, because the heat and the sun, the feathers break down more quickly. And like I said, the eclipse plumages of ducks, very, very difficult. Adult plumage on the top, everybody wants to take pictures. An eclipse plumage in August, not so much. And from this is a gargony, and a male in eclipse. I think that few people would even recognize this as a male, because it looks exactly like a female. And gargonies, especially in Northwestern Europe, are scarce and a little bit wary, so it's difficult to get them. So you need somebody who's really looking out for and take pictures of it. I think it was taken by Edwin Winkel, actually. And some other real challenges were things like white-headed duck in flight. This was taken a few days after the Dupont's lark by Vincent Legrand. This is one of the very few white-headed ducks in flight images. I think that they migrate, but I think they migrate at night and then they just drop down as soon as it gets light. It took me like 2 or 3 years to find even a flight image of this species. The Dupont's lark, but also some rails were super difficult, of course. Right is the Bellion's crake, a male, and below is a little crake by Marc's Varsvuur, female in flight. So we wanted everything because there are some identification features, but the challenges are pretty hard. And another difficult type of species are erratic flying songbirds, and especially European greenfinch and linnet, because they have this weird erratic flight. They're super difficult to get really good flight shots. How you see them in flight. And this is what we finally got, linnet on the left and male and female European greenfinch on the right. But still, there could be improvement, but they're super difficult for the autofocus, especially the older generation cameras, to track these species. And the hardest ones were the Cinereus bunting, a juvenile first winter. It was near impossible. In the end, we found one bird of a birder who went to Lesbos in September and took a picture of the nominate subspecies. But I think they just migrate straight from the breeding areas to Africa, and they're hardly picked up in autumn in Israel or further south. And Upschuss warbler and olive tree warblers in autumn plumage, also super difficult. We had luckily an Upschuss warbler in the Netherlands, and it's probably a first winter. But things like an autumn olive tree warbler, I still haven't seen, or I haven't got pictures of, and an autumn winter adult Upschuss warbler, we also didn't. I think the latest date is July from a bird in Israel, but I think they just head into Africa, and then you really need to go there and do ringing to take pictures of it. But it's I think they just leave already very quickly Europe. But finally, the books are here. It took a little bit longer, but it was a super nice ride, and and it couldn't be without the help of proofreaders, because it was so much text and it was written over so long time. We had to share the burden of the work, and especially I'm proud that my dad was also one of the proofreaders, so that I'm super happy and proud of. And I also spent like a week in your house, Dave. It's just proofreading, from dusk to dawn, just to get it finished before the printing date. So this is a little bit about the process of the book, and and what can you expect if you buy it. That's basically, I think that is the most interesting part for most people. What we did is like a super simple setup. We have an introduction per family group, how the structure of the feathers are, an introduction about mold and wear and identification. Then we have a species plate per species and sometimes even per subspecies. And in the end of these family groups, we usually have direct comparison plates for similar looking plumages or similar to looking species. This is how an introduction section looks like. This is the leaf warblers. There's usually some bird topography, showing all the most important feather parts for identification on the bird. Also how P1 and P2 looks like. That's also very interesting for identifications. And also something about the major parts of the bird which are interesting for identification. And here it's like the primary projection and the mold pattern and how the primary looks like, because it says something about identification. But by weight, it already looks different. There's more, different parts of the birds are more interesting. And for gulls, especially, I think we have like 4 or 5 pages of introductions to get everything what we wanted to say about identification in general across the plates. Species plate look like this. So we cut out all the images and we have like 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 pages per species. And these are some of my most favorites, of course. This is ivory gull and Ross's gull. I think 2 of the most beautiful birds in the world. And some, like I said, have more. This is the blue throat, which has a lot of variation in Europe. The main one is the one with the white star. We have the red star. In Spain is the Acicoles, which is with the blue throat, which is a bird of northern Spain. But in Europe, in the Netherlands, we also have something which has an orange star, which is sometimes been seen. It's on the left plate in the middle. It's something that sometimes be seen, but we don't know yet. And especially the autumn plumages, we don't have the subspecies because it's most of the time it's very difficult to identify them on subspecies level. And also some more rare birds are in the book, like seabones wheater, Atlas wheater, it might be called in the UK. It's relatively new to Europe, but the records are increasing, and even during the designing of these plates, some even found maybe a new identification feature. And if you look at the head patterns on the left, you see that the shape of the bill of the sea bones is not pointed, but is a little bit thicker and goes back into a point. And it's pretty straightforward in most photographs that we found. So it might even be a very good identification feature to find not only the adult plumages in the field, but also the first winter and female plumages in Europe. So it might help to increase the records in Europe. Another super nice plate which I like is Amur falcon, which is not unlike red-footed falcon, but it has so many more different type of plumages that you can identify in the field, and it's a species that is increasing. So we hopefully, with the more awareness of this book, the records will increase. And this should be, this is Siberian ruby throat and Siberian blue robin. It's one of the my favorite vagrants in Europe. Hopefully, the Siberian robin will find its way to the Netherlands. And finally, the direct comparison plates. This is how we wanted to present all the similar looking species. And we didn't put the whole species next to each other, but just parts, what is necessary for identification. So for ringtail harriers is the underwing pattern of the species and the gender and age, and the head pattern of all the ringtail harriers. Another way of presenting it is with the terns, that we've put all the adult winter type plumages of terns next to each other, so you can see how you can identify them. And for wood warblers, identification is usually either the heads, so the way of the supercilium and the color and the bill shape and how the supercilium reaches the bill, yes or no, but also on the wing structures. So we have maybe 8 pages of heads and wings of the species compared to each other. And hopefully that will make the identification of these species much more easier, because you have all the information next to each other and you can actually see it on the image. And 2 of my favorites are the yellow wagtails I see in next to each other because they're stunning, and all the tails of the buntings. It was a hard search, but identification of the tails. It's the tail feathers are super needed for identification. So this is sort of the book. It's like 1,050 pages long of these kinds of pages. There is no information about a song or distribution, like distribution maps. It's really focused on identification of these species. And the next plan is that there will be an English edition. Translation is well underway by James Litzer and Vincent van der Spek, and will be published by Princeton University Press, hopefully end of this year. There will also be a Spanish edition by Lynx Editions, and it will be translated by Marshall Gill. Tomorrow we have our first meeting to get it started. And hopefully there will be other language editions, because our vision was to get all the information to as many birders in Europe as possible. So hopefully there will be more in the future. We will start working on the 3rd volume, which includes the extreme vagrants of Europe, which we haven't included here, and probably also most of the Western Palearctic birds, which was like the 3rd volume. Hopefully a field guide version at some stage. The app will be hopefully also introduced at one stage if we find the time, and there are some more ideas to what we can do with the content, and hopefully also with sounds. So there is enough in store, but basically first we want to have the English and the Spanish edition out, and it's not ours anymore, so now it's from the birding community. So what other people thought, I thought might be interesting, because we can think something, but what other people thought, for now it was super well received by the Dutch community. So these are some of the quotes that we found in reviews or online, and it was very well received. So I still get people calling and say, okay, I still use it every day, because they're just browsing to it or just finding something that they need, or they just. Some people are now looking at magpies in their garden or dunnocks to identify them, which if it's a first year or an adult bird, because now they have the knowledge to do it. And 2 of my favorite quotes that were about the book was, one said, okay, this is a fairy tale book of birds for bird watchers and nature lovers. He thought it was like a fairy tale book because it gave him the same feeling. And there was a recent quote on Twitter that somebody said that, and it was actually an English birder who bought the book already in Dutch because he couldn't wait. And he said there should be a warning sign on the thrushes in flight page. And for those who are keen, this is the thrushes in flight, and we managed to find all the species of the major thrushes in flight, including some of the hardest, like Siberian thrush and white thrush. I think that any birder, is always expecting one of these, these wing flashes of whites and Siberian thrushes in flight one day. So hopefully. And so this is sort of my conclusion of my little presentation about the handbook. First of all, I want to thank, of course, Niels, Jack, and Sam for the teamwork, and of course Roy and Will from Agami and all the Agami photographers. But I also want to mention Bart Wessel, who just stopped his job as the CEO of KNV Publishing. He basically gave us carte blanche and picked up the bill for whatever thing we were doing. He believed in the project, and he gave us carte blanche to get what we had in mind on paper. And I think he came in the project on year 2 and said we were almost finished. And 4 years later, he was just in time to see it published. So thanks very, very much. And of course, all the other birders and photographers who contributed to the handbook, with it. I think that, it's really, for me, it's like a project built on the shoulders of all the other people. So super, super grateful for everybody's help.
Well, I'm speechless, and Marc, all I can say is one word, and that word is inspirational. Totally and utterly inspirational. I think this book, given all the detail you've gone into, for me, is a game changer in terms of how we look at birds. And I think that I'm hoping that people will pick this up, and even, it's not so much even looking for rare birds, it's looking at things like, your common garden birds in a different way.
It's especially for common birds, because I think that for rare birds, most of the knowledge is already know it, but because there is so much more to learn about the common birds, you have new reasons to go outside and see it for yourself. That's what we want to envision. You have the book, you think, oh, is that possible? And then you go out and you see it. And I think that it will, the idea was to get people more out on different time of the year just to find all these plumages. And not only, advanced birders, but especially beginning birders, because a friend of mine said, okay, yeah, but it's only for more advanced birders. I said, no, of course not. All this knowledge is available. Why should is it only for, advanced birders? If you have a kid and he goes to basketball, you don't give him the worst shoes. You give him the best shoes, so you have an advantage. You want to give the advantage also to the beginning birders.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it was for advanced birders, then you wouldn't have mute swans and mallards in it. It just stands to reason. Now, listen, we could talk all night, but I need to ask you two questions. We're going to have to continue this in the Q&A, and for those who aren't members of the Urban Birder World community, you're going to miss this. So you better become a member, and then you can see all those wonderful questions coming out in the next few minutes. But anyway, what is your favorite bird?
Yeah, there are too many. So I think seabirds are, albatrosses and Petrodroma petrels. That family is very close to my heart, and storm petrels. And I like pittas and hummingbirds, and I like to take pictures of them. So those are the main, my interest.
Okay.
So yeah, I think in Europe it will be wall creeper, because it's stunning. It's something else.
It's funny, I was out looking for one today, but the wind was so strong, I didn't even see a pigeon, let alone a wall creeper. If you could be anywhere in the world, where would you be right now?
Well, Spain would be very good, have some...
Hanging out with me, yeah?
Yeah, some sun, some warmth, work from there, so who knows? But now today, I'm super happy where I am today. There's some trips coming up, but, if I have to pick a place, I would go to Spain tomorrow.
Excellent. All right, Zoom is just to let you know, on the 30th of January, because we were meant to have another in conservation with this week, but that's going to be moved to March the 2nd. I'll tell you that in a second. But on the 30th of January, which is a Monday, we got Arjun. I can't pronounce his surname. I'm sure you can because he's Dutch.
Leon Dwarshuis.
Yeah, him. We got him. We got Arjun talking about his big year, which is going to be really fascinating. February the 2nd, we have a woman called Cami. Well, she's actually from Thailand, and I can't pronounce her name either, but her sort of pet name is Cami, I think. And she's going to be talking about the conservation of the spoonbill sandpiper in Thailand. On February the 9th, I'm really excited to have Juan Benito. He's a Spanish guy. He's a professor, I think. But he's written or produced a book which is about the extinct birds of the mosaic. I forgot the name of the bloody period of time, but in the dinosaur days, the early birds, a guide to those early birds. Amazing. It's actually like they are in real life. So we're going to be talking about that. My mate, Mike Dilger, TV personality, he's here on Thursday the 16th of February talking about his new book, 1,000 Plants in 365 Days. On March the 2nd, we've got Karen Backer, who was supposed to be here on Thursday. She's going to be here on that date talking about sounds in nature. On Tuesday the 28th of March, we've got Kagi Karu, who's written the book about our relationship with animals, and there's a lot more people coming. So that's roughly what's happening in the next few weeks. Marc, thank you so much. That's a fascinating book. I'm looking forward to talking about this more in the Q&A, but thank you so much for sparing your time and, you know, presenting your book to us. And I'm looking forward to the English version without a doubt.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, David. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And Zoomers, thank you very much for your attention tonight. It's great to see you all. Hope to see you again, obviously. And don't forget, keep looking up.